here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. You know, in order to address some of the issues that have come forward as a result of this virus, it's important to know where the problems have been. Early on, it is said we didn't have enough tests. Now we have really tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of tests being unleashed in order to gather the data. And the data is important to know who's sick, where they're located, and so forth and so on, so you can respond to it. The private sector has acted unbelievably in this regard. We now have tests that you can do at home in 45 minutes. We have all kinds of telemedical activity going on with doctors and others. This is all in the last 6 to 8 weeks. The magnificent American private sector, even though so much of it has been shut down. And despite the cackling from Pelosi and Schumer and the left and the media demanding that we nationalize industries, as if somebody in the federal government knows how to run an assembly line. Can you name one person who's ever run an assembly line, worked on an assembly line, knows how to run a business? No, you can't, other than the president. But it's important to understand, we now know a majority of the cases are in New York City. 56% to 56% of the cases, 60% of the new cases. You also have people, leaving New York City, heading to places, especially like Florida. And the governor there has a new issue because a lot of the people leaving New York City may have this virus and may not know it. So he's asking everybody who's coming from New York City to self-quarantine for 14 days, and let's hope they do so. This is the way you attack this virus. But you're hearing a constant demand, plea from the governor of New York, among others, but mostly him, that goes unchallenged by any New York media. In fact, by any national media. And I've shared my information with some national media. When the governor talks about the lack of ventilators, when the governor talks about the lack of beds. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not new for New York. This is not new for New York. New York has known about the bed situation. And New York has known about the ventilator situation. Now, to the defense of any state and any governor, you cannot ramp up to effectively, as the president calls it, a wartime healthcare crisis situation. It's just not possible. What are you going to focus on? Which illness? Which virus? So I understand this. And Governor Cuomo should understand this. Because as the governor of the state of New York, as all the other governors, he had it within his power, any time during his governorship, to order more beds, to order more facilities, to order the expansion of existing hospitals and facilities, including ICU beds. He had it within his power to order more ventilators. And it's not like New York and these other states didn't know about it. So I want to dig into this with you even further. And as I say, I've shared some of this information with some reporters who have all but ignored it. I found a piece, an abstract as they call it, written several years ago, but not forever ago. I believe it was 2008. By then, Dr. and PhD Louis Rubinson and Michael D. Christian, MD, FRCPC. And the headline is Allocating Medical Ventilators During Mass Respiratory Failure. That's this situation. Kudos to New York State, but more work to be done. Now, I want you to listen to why they're giving them kudos. And by the way, this article is behind a wall, so I'm going to read that portion of it, which is in front of the wall. And they write, in this issue of Disaster Medicine and Public Health Preparedness, Powell et al. Summarized the efforts of the New York State Work Group on the allocation in an influenza pandemic to develop guidance for the allocation of scarce mechanical ventilators during a severe influenza pandemic. Now, this isn't a severe influenza pandemic, but it's a pandemic, the Wuhan virus. In the United States, a core societal expectation is nearly limitless provision of critical care to those who want it, who have acute organ failure. Provision of usual critical care for the many additional patients anticipated during disasters such as a severe influenza pandemic poses an insurmountable challenge for most communities. I want to underscore a point. I'm not in the panic business. That's not what I do here. I'm not in the panic business. I'm in the realism business. And then I draw my conclusions and give my opinions. Then I draw my conclusions, and we have been extremely prudential and careful here, day in and day out. No hype. As I said before, you don't need hype when the situation already involves hype. And by that I mean the situation is already really upsetting people, and rightly so. Rightly so. But you still need to look at the facts. I'll leave the hyper conduct to the media. So already you learn, I haven't even finished the first paragraph, that they believe a severe influenza pandemic poses an insurmountable challenge for most communities. And here we have this Wuhan virus. When efforts to augment critical care are insufficient to meet need, and there's no fair and just system to allocate scarce life-sustaining interventions, then community trust in the broader healthcare delivery system may cease, thereby compromising the entire medical and public response. At first glance, it may seem absurd to focus on critical care delivery for an event with such a severe mismatch of patient need and medical resources. And this is 2008. Indeed, critical care preparedness and response should not divert so many resources that core public health efforts cannot be accomplished. This is exactly what we've talked about. In other words, you can't ramp up for a pandemic that you're not even familiar with day in and day out. But let's go on, because Governor Cuomo apparently thinks she can, but he didn't do it. At the same time, the plausible widespread transmission of a virulent pathogen, uncertain effectiveness and timely availability of vaccine and antimicrobials, and the existing large proportions of the population with comorbidities and social vulnerabilities increase the likelihood of mass critical illness even in communities with excellent public health services. This is remarkably prescient 12 years after it's written. Of those critically ill, many who receive critical care may survive, just as the majority of patients survive every day with similar serious syndromes. Acute respiratory distress syndrome and severe sepsis, for instance. It is unfortunate that individuals who are unable to access essential critical care services are likely to die. In the United States, intensive care unit ICU beds frequently are a scarce commodity, and published guidance already exists for equitable access. Under usual conditions, all of the patients with clear need for critical care interventions, I'm reading with one eye still, sorry, and considerable likelihood of surviving are admitted to ICUs. ICU triage usually is used to divert patients too healthy or too ill to benefit from critical care. Even with the usual ICU triage, everyday access to critical care is based largely on critical ill patients' desire for aggressive resource needs of other critically ill patients. So you see, we're down to the jungle. Not enough supply, too much demand. Because everyday triage and rationing methods would be insufficient to handle the dramatic mismatches between patient need and available resources. Stick with me. The New York State Work Group had to develop a new paradigm for allocation of scarce critical care resources. The New York State Work Group, this is 2008, focused on allocation of mechanical ventilators during a severe influenza pandemic. Their process, I'm really struggling reading. I'm sorry. I've got one eye that is legally blind and another eye focused on the screen here. Just stick with me. Their process is intended to be used for any catastrophe and with patients with respiratory failure far outnumber critical care capability. Their guidance for allocating mechanical ventilators should not be interpreted as limited solely to the ventilator machines, but more broadly. One must consider all the resources necessary for ventilation: ventilator, ancillary equipment, such as circuits, adequately skilled staff, and so forth. Their guidance rationally can be applied to other key life-sustaining interventions when triaging critically ill patients, for instance, renal replacement therapy for mass crush syndrome after an earthquake. The authors anticipate that most patients with critical illness due to influenza will have respiratory failure. Positive pressure ventilation is the current standard for respiratory failure, and mechanical ventilators are most commonly used for sustained PBF, that is, positive pressure ventilation. Patients with severe acute respiratory failure, unable to receive adequate PBF, almost assuredly will die. Still, mechanical ventilation is not a guarantee of survival, and some people will die despite access to it. To best use scarce resources, managing medical catastrophes requires deliberate transition from individual-centered to population-focused critical care. You understand? Do you understand what that means, Mr. Producer? Rationing. Rationing based on a number. That's the end of the article that's available to me. Rationing based on a number of factors that states and even local hospitals take into consideration: age, underlying illnesses, likelihood of survival, and so forth and so on. New York State, the governor's office, had to be aware of this. Ventilators aren't like thermometers. They're not like Band-Aids. They're life and death for many people. When you're on a ventilator, you've got 1 foot in the grave and 1 foot out. You may or may not survive, but that's where the rubber hits the road, may I say. New York State knew over a decade ago that when it comes to a pandemic, it was woefully short of ventilators. So why now is the governor of New York acting like it's the responsibility of the President of the United States? The federal government has and has had an inventory of ventilators for emergency purposes, including the military. Hurricanes, whatever. 12,000 I've heard, 20,000 I've heard, 60,000 currently available throughout in use. It was not supposed to be the supplier of ventilators when there's a pandemic. President Trump is trying to fill that void. GM and other companies are now trying to fill that void as fast as they possibly can. When Andrew Cuomo, for some reason, is being celebrated, why I don't know, when Andrew Cuomo says today if we don't have 140,000 ventilators and 40,000 ICU ventilators in 2 weeks, knowing that's almost virtually impossible, who's going to decide who lives and dies? Where are the reporters asking him exactly those questions? What is the protocol in the state of New York, which is in charge of its hospitals, in charge of its ventilators, in charge of its MRIs and the CTs, in charge of hospital beds, including ICU beds? What is the protocol in New York, Mr. Cuomo, Governor, when you don't have enough ventilators? And how much money during your governorship have you focused on ventilators as opposed to, say, abortion? I'm just curious. More when I return. I'll be right back. Don't you wish you were at a post office right now? Me neither. Running a business or keeping up with your schedule takes a lot of time, and sometimes there just aren't enough hours in the day. That's why you need Stamps.com. Anything you can do at the post office, you can do at Stamps.com. Their on-demand postage means you can skip that trip to the post office. With Stamps.com, you can get 5 cents off every first-class stamp and up to 40% off shipping rates. Not to mention, it's a fraction of the cost of those expensive postage meters. Stamps.com is a no-brainer, saving you time and money. It's no wonder over 700,000 small businesses already use Stamps.com. Right now, my listeners get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a digital scale without any long-term commitment. Go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in the word bunker. That's Stamps.com, enter bunker. At his press conference, cut 3, go.
And our hospital system has about 3,000 or 4,000 that has always met the need. This is a dramatic increase in the number of ventilators that you need. We have been working around the clock, scouring the globe. We've procured about 7,000 ventilators. We need, at a minimum, an additional 30,000 ventilators. You cannot buy them. You cannot find them. Every state is trying to get them. Other countries are trying to get them. The capacity is limited. They're technical pieces of equipment. They're not manufactured in 2 days or 4 days or 7 days or 10 days. So this is a critical and desperate need for ventilators.
Now, I'm not saying that he should anticipate that he needs whatever it is. Now it's 30,000, but I heard other numbers. Ventilators. But why does he think the president should have anticipated it? New York knew it was short a lot of ventilators if there's a pandemic. Now there's a pandemic and they're short. Now he's telling us what we already know. It's complicated equipment, it's expensive equipment, and it's not easy to get when you have a pandemic. New York was told this in 2008. I'll be right back. You'd pay off your IRS debt if you could, but you can't. You don't have the money. And now you're asking this important question. Is this the day the IRS shows up at my work, garnishes my wages, and seizes my bank accounts, maybe even my home? Let me suggest a way to end your IRS nightmare. Call Optima Tax Relief, America's most trusted tax resolution firm. Now, they're experts in the Fresh Start Initiative, a powerful IRS program that could save you thousands if you qualify. In fact, Optima's resolved over $1 billion of tax debt for people just like you. Get the peace of mind that comes when you have Optima on your side, standing between you and the IRS, fighting to help stop aggressive collection actions and helping to protect your assets. Don't wait. Put your IRS worries to rest. Call 800-499-6300. 800-499-6300. 800-499-6300. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Tomorrow's morning show. You can reach Mark now at 877-381-3811.
You know, if you're a Federalist and you believe in state authority, and because states are supposed to know what's going on in their hospitals, in their hospital rooms, in their medical facilities, in their medical schools, certainly more than a president, that's part of their job, right? You need state certifications to build hospitals. You got all kinds of requirements from the states. If you graduate from medical school, You graduate in a particular state, much like law school, and you can practice in that state, and on and on and on. They basically, almost, not completely, but 90% monopoly control over what goes on in their borders. So what happens when they're not ready for a pandemic, which, frankly, in many cases is understandable? But in many cases, it's not. At least be more ready. What happens when states don't prioritize their funding? Particularly liberal states. And that could be a state like Maryland with a Republican governor who's liberal, or a state like New York, a Democrat state with a Democrat governor who's liberal. You never heard Andrew Cuomo talking about potential pandemics, about expanding hospital facilities, ICU beds, ventilators in case there's a pandemic. Not until now. You never heard him say a word about it. Abortion, he'll talk about it till he's blue in the face. Climate change, till he's blue in the face. Illegal aliens, having citizen rights, till he's blue in the face. And on down the left-wing agenda. You never heard him talk about any of this. Because many of these governors think that they're national drama students. And they're part of the left-wing agenda. This is part of their job. The president can backfill. The federal government can move as fast as it can. That's exactly what's taking place here. So now they're stuck. And so what happens is, when a state hits a wall like this, it becomes nationalized. So now we need to nationalize certain industries, nationalize certain assembly lines, in order to try and fill the gap that a governor or a state or governors and states failed to handle in the first place. Now, I'm okay with that when we're all Americans, okay? The problem is, I don't think this governor's learned his lesson. And the press doesn't hold his feet to the fire. There's not one reporter in New York who has said to this governor, all the years you've been governor, why wasn't this a priority? All the years you were governor, you had this report about an influenza pandemic. This is worse than that, but it's still a pandemic. What did you do about ventilators then? What did you do about beds then in ICUs and hospitals and expansion and so forth? Damn little. More Cuomo today. Cut 4, go.
There is no other way for us to get these ventilators. We've tried everything else.
You know, this is my point. So not every, but many states, many towns, many hospitals, many countries are out now for the same thing. An extremely complicated and expensive piece of equipment. So you drive up the price, and the availability is very difficult. It's very limited. So he has an idea. Go ahead.
The only way we can obtain these ventilators is from the federal government, period. And there's two ways the federal government can do it. One is to use the Federal Defense Production Act. There's a federal law where the federal government can say to manufacturers, you must produce.
Now, folks, you understand this law is called the Defense Production Act. They're twisting this law for this pandemic. Nobody will tell you this but me. This law is actually intended in 1950. It's the Stafford Act, named after a former Republican senator from Vermont. This law was passed in 1950 to address production in the Korean War. This is a law that's intended for war, actual war, not pandemics. Because you're opening up a potential Pandora's box if you had like a Pelosi as president or Schumer as president or frankly a Biden or a Sanders. They can call whatever they want, a disaster, a war, a pandemic, and they're off to the races. And I worry about these things. I know the media don't. I do. So he's saying this war power should be used to dictate to manufacturers to produce this product. Like that's simple to do. Like that's simple to do. Go ahead.
this product. I understand the federal government's point that many companies have come forward and said we want to help, and General Motors and Ford and people are willing to get into the ventilator business. It does us no good if they start to create a ventilator in 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks. We're looking at an apex of 14 days. If we don't have the ventilators in 14 days, it does us no good.
Let me tell you what he knows. That what's taking place in New York City is at hyperspeed. It's sad. But now New York City is the epicenter of this virus. And he knows that in 14 days, the death toll is going to go up significantly. That's what he knows. And he knows he wasn't prepared. He doesn't have the ventilators. And he doesn't have the beds. And it wasn't his focus before this time. So he wants the president to nationalize a private company or private companies and force them to build ventilators. But he says we only have 14 days. Ladies and gentlemen, it is extraordinarily difficult. Ask the men and women on the assembly line in Detroit and elsewhere to go from producing automobiles to producing ventilators just to get the parts, just to get the know-how. In 2 weeks' time, to retool an entire assembly line from one product that has nothing to do with another product, a complicated product, to get the parts, to have the skill, to produce it, to package it, to transport it, in 14 days. This is what the governor of New York is saying. After he just said that this is a complicated piece of equipment and you can't build this thing, let me quote him, and they're not manufactured in 2 days, 4 days, 7 days, or 10 days. But he needs them in 14 days. Cuomo has done a grave disservice to the city and state of New York. And he's still doing it, in my opinion. Hopefully they'll get thousands and thousands of more ventilators. I have a connection and affinity to the people of New York City. I started my radio career in New York City. I love New York City. The cops, the firefighters, the hardworking people there. In my time slot in New York City, I'm the highest rated show in talk radio. It pains me to see what incompetents have done to this city and this state. It pains me. I just want you to know the truth. You're not going to get it from ProPublica. You're not going to get it from Mediaite. You're not going to get it from Media Matters. Media Matters and ProPublica, both of which have been funded by Soros and other reprobates. You're not going to get it from the New York Times and the Washington Post. In fact, you're not going to get it anywhere but from me. From me. And New York's not the only state where this has taken place. There's now 35 states. One state withdrew from the certificate of need laws. When you have states with iron-fisted, heavy, smothering regulations, and they don't have the knowledge or the motivation to conduct themselves in a way that is trying to see what might take place in the future. And you have a report here in 2008 that I just read to you, where the state is being told you don't have even close to enough ventilators if we have a pandemic. And this governor did, as best as I know, absolutely nothing up to this point to prepare for anything. Whether it's hospital beds, hospitals, the expansion of hospital facilities, ventilators, respirators, or all the rest. It's easy to now say, hey, we need more ventilators. I know it takes 10 days to produce them, maybe 14. And if we don't have them in 14 days, all hell's going to break loose here. And if I don't get them, it's the federal government's fault. It's Trump's fault for not nationalizing industries and so forth and so on. That's pretty outrageous. And so the president responded to this in part today. Cut 5, go.
I watched Governor Cuomo, and he was very nice. We're building them hospitals, we're building them medical centers, and he was complaining about we're doing probably more, definitely more than anybody else. And he was talking about the ventilators, but he should have ordered the ventilators. And he had a choice, he had a chance, because right here, I just got this out, that he refused to order 15,000 ventilators. I'll show this to Bill, but take a look at that, Bill. What does that say?
Is this social distancing here?
This says New York Governor Cuomo rejected buying recommended 16,000 ventilators in 2015 for a pandemic, established death panels and lotteries instead. So he had a chance to buy in 2015 16,000 ventilators at a very low price, and he turned it down. I'm not blaming him or anything else, but he shouldn't be talking about us. He's supposed to be buying his own ventilators. We're going to help.
It's exactly right. And every state's supposed to be doing this. Every state's supposed to be doing this. And if you believe in federalism as I do, then this governor and the state legislature should be held to account. The mayor should be held to account. Does anybody remember Mayor DeCamio prior to this virus demanding more ventilators or ICU beds? No, of course you don't. They're too busy remaking the world, imposing their will on the people. How about Bloomberg? No. He's too busy dictating 32-ounce drinks and other ridiculous things. This is what happens when public officials aren't focused where they're supposed to be focused. Now, it can still happen. It can still happen because, as I said, economically, you can't be on a pandemic level resource spending binge day in and day out. But New York takes in a crap load of money from the citizens of New York, from the businesses in New York, an enormous amount of money. It spends it on so many frivolous things. This was not a priority. It's not a priority in the state of Virginia. Wasn't a priority in the state of California. Instead, political hot buttons are the priorities. And now they just say, well, the federal government should do it. The federal government should fill in. How can the richest country on the face of the earth not do this? Just nationalize a few companies, tell them what to produce. We'll produce it, and we'll get them out there. And if I don't have them in 14 days, what's the point? Well, what is the point, Governor? What is your point? When we get the beds, you did the same thing. Under the Certificate of Need laws, and not just him. There's now 35 states in the District of Columbia that limit the number of ICU beds and hospital beds and hospitals and hospital expansions. Now, there's economic reasons in part for that, but there's also political reasons in part for that. In the county where I live, they know damn well that the main hospital here couldn't handle, forget about a pandemic, a terrible flu season. But you had two companies come in here a couple of years back, both of which wanted to build hospitals, and they chose one over another. Well, you might say that's because of economics. Well, these private companies got to decide on the economics. How does the state know about the economics? So we have hundreds of less hospital beds and ICU beds in my county as a result of decisions by the state of Virginia. And if we have a pandemic here, we won't be prepared either. But the president is exactly right. What they did in New York, and what this article was touching on, is they set in place how they would ration these machines, and who would live and who would die. That's what you've got in New York right now. I'll be right back. Remove a president for 3 years. All the things that could have been done. All the things that could have been done in so many areas. Quality of life for the American people. None of it done. A Bloomberg reporter, Steve Dennis, is tweeting out that one of the remaining snags in the stimulus package in the Senate Democrats want abortion providers like Planned Parenthood to be eligible for aid under the small business portion of the bill. So they want to fund the virus of abortion, which, as I understand it, by the way, kills babies, not the elderly over 80. The irony is sickening. This is utterly immoral. But they are so obsessed with abortion that apparently that's one of the things that is holding this up. They want Planned Parenthood to be able to borrow money from the small business portion of the bill. Those of you unemployed, those businesses going out of business or shuttered, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. Oh, they're moderates, don't you know? Since when is abortion moderate? Since when is this obsession moderate? Ventilators, beds. If they spend as much time talking about ventilators and beds over the last 10 years as they do about abortion, we'd have enough ventilators and beds. Wouldn't we, Governor Cuomo? American Financing truly is a company that's dedicated to making the entire mortgage process easier. I can't say that enough. They write every loan type in the industry, and they offer a digital mortgage product so you can apply online anytime, anywhere. It's very fast and convenient. I also like that they don't charge upfront fees, and you don't have to pay to qualify like you do with other mortgage companies. They're a dream to work with. They're family-owned. Their people are not on commission. They're paid a salary. So if you're looking to buy a home or refinance, this is the company, American Financing. So why not take 10 minutes out of your day and see what their mortgage consultants can do for you? I'm quite serious. Rates are extremely low. They're not going any lower. They're only going to go up. Even if you already own a home, may be a good time for you to call and see if you can refinance to a lower rate. It could mean a lower monthly mortgage payment and tens of thousands of dollars in overall saving. Just in the nick of time, right? So make the free, no-obligation call today. If you're at home and you're concerned about your payments coming up, there are things you can try and do. Call 888-900-1828. That's their number, 888-900-1828, or apply online at AmericanFinancing.net.
American Financing, NMLS 182334, www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org.
When we come back, I want to talk about this so-called stimulus spending. I'm getting very, very nervous. This thing started out last week at $1 trillion. Then we heard $1.2 trillion, then $1.8 trillion. Now we're hearing $2 trillion. They stay in there another 5 hours, it's going to be $2.5 trillion.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number 877-318-381-3811. Our number's back. Our real number's back. All right. You heard what I said at the close of the first hour, that apparently, according to a Bloomberg reporter, one of the snags right now in getting this $2 trillion bill passed is the demands by the Democrats that Planned Parenthood be eligible to get loans from the Small Business Administration. We are a very sick society. One day, maybe it'll be 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, if mankind still exists, they'll be looking at this society crumbling from within. This isn't a religious issue. This is a moral issue. The sick irony of Americans, states, the federal government moving heaven and earth to save people from this virus, shutting down an economy, putting people out of work, shuttering businesses to save people from a virus. And we're going to have funding to ensure that the abortion mills continue to produce, regardless of the economic situation. And we know for certain that the vast majority of human beings who are aborted die. We know for certainty that they are babies. Not 80 years old, not over 70 years old. We know this as a matter of fact. And you won't hear a single reporter, because this is the American mindset now. The culture has been bastardized. Well, how many abortions are we talking about? How many non-medically necessary abortions are we actually talking about? Which is the vast majority. How many are we talking about? Doesn't matter. Just call it a choice, a woman's right, and it's no longer a human being. Forget about it. What if we had a virus that did the same thing as abortion doctors do? Would that upset us? A human being is a human being. Politics aside, these organizations aside, the sick irony, and I'm serious about this, of using this massive bill to include abortion funding. That is, your tax dollars loaned to Planned Parenthood. You know, Planned Parenthood is not part of the government. You would think it is. Now, this is the second effort by Pelosi and the Democrats. The first was to have you directly fund abortions as part of this bill. Now, it's just to wash it through Planned Parenthood. So a bill that is intended to save not just jobs and businesses, but lives, will include money, if the Democrats have their way, to kill lives. Oh, it's a choice, but it's still to kill lives. And look, I'm not a fundamentalist. This is, for me, you know what? This isn't even a religious thing for me. It's a moral thing for me. It's a moral thing for me. It's a moral issue for me. I believe I'm a rational human being. I think this stuff through. And unless you're going to be caught up in these fortune cookie statements, I mean, who's ignoring the science now? Who's denying the science now? Is it a baby or isn't it? Yes, it is. Sick. Absolutely sick. Now, I want to talk about this bill. My friend Kudlow and other friends in the administration, some friends on the Hill, he was saying today at the press conference, it's really a $6 trillion infusion of money, because with this $500 billion or so that Treasury gets to hold on to, it's not a slush fund. The Democrats are just out of their minds. Ignore everything they say. They're stupid and they're vile. That's right. Just like their media brothers and sisters. They're the same mindset. Some are dressed up as journalists, some are dressed up as politicians, and some are dressed up as circus clowns, you know. Sorry, my wife likes circus clowns. But anyway, $6 trillion. And it'll get liquidity, they say, liquidity into the system. Well, if your governors are ordering restaurants to shut down, bars to shut down, sports arenas to shut down, if they're ordering a huge percentage of the economy to shut down, exactly where's this liquidity going? Where's it going? This isn't the case where the economy went belly up based on economic decisions, market decisions, cycles, and so forth and so on. That's not this. The virus comes in and the government is shutting down parts of the economy. So you're going to have the government on the one hand shutting down businesses, and then on the other hand pouring money into businesses. But market will go to individuals, and they're going to do exactly what with it? Particularly those who are still working. What is the justification, economic or moral, for people who are still working to be getting $1,200 an adult, $500 a kid, or whatever the number they come up with? What is the justification for that? There is none. That's pure politics, class warfare that the Democrats are pushing, Romney's pushing, others are pushing. You can target assistance the way you target military operations. You can target assistance the way you target medical operations. And this is what some of us have been talking about. I'm not talking about, I want to be utterly clear about this. All of a sudden, every business and every part of the country should open up. Everybody should, get back to wet kisses and all that. No, I'm not arguing that. But there are businesses that are being shuttered that don't need to be shuttered. There are parts of the country where businesses are being shuttered. Well, those parts of the country don't have an epidemic or a pandemic. We talked about this yesterday. The brilliant Dr. David Katz from Yale. Expert. PhD. MD. Why are you sending college kids home? To their parents and their grandparents? Why are you sending a 21, 22, 23-year college student home, or 17, 18, I guess, college student home, to parents that might be in their 50s, grandparents that might be in their 70s, 80s, 90s, who knows? When you're spreading the virus, theoretically, potentially, within the family. The thing is, you kind of want all those college students together. You want them to go through the virus, as they say, wash through. And then they develop immunities. And then pretty much in their case, you don't have a lot of worries anymore. At least that's the thinking. Instead of, you know what? We have tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, I don't know, college students. You all go home. Wait a minute. Why are you doing that? You just sent them all home. Many of them to their parents and their grandparents. And then, after the fact, they say, okay, but if you're in the house with a grandparent, you should treat it like you have the virus. They're in one end of the house, you're in another end. How ridiculous is this? Same with the ventilators. Now, putting aside the responsibilities and the failures of the states, let's move on. There's certain cities and metro areas and states, relative handful, that are getting clobbered by this virus. New York City, we know this. L.A., San Francisco, Seattle. Right now, they're the four worst. Miami's starting to pick up. And by the way, just think about the progressive utopia. We're all supposed to live in close quarters together, right? We're all supposed to use public transportation, right? In other words, you're corralling human beings for the sake of preventing climate change. Now, what if we actually had the type of society, the economic society, that the progressives have been pushing? They're moving us in that direction. What if we had the federal government running health care for everybody? The same knuckleheads doing this as do other things. Really, limitations on cars or your use of cars. We're all using they'd be shutting down public transportation, and this virus would be picking up even more than it is. One of the reasons it is in New York is because of the density of the city. New York is far more dense than L.A. or Chicago. I'm talking about population-wise. That is, more people live in smaller areas, more condensed areas, than L.A. or Chicago. And so it takes off. And it's taking off. Enormous number of people rely on public transportation. Well, they can't now. And there's a brilliant piece by Michael Walsh in the Daily Wire. He's brilliant to begin with, but a brilliant piece there. And I like it a lot because it kind of sums up what I've been saying for the last 7 or 8, 9 days as well. Like mine's. And he points out, why are we doing these things? Broadly, like everybody lives in New York City or L.A. or Seattle or San Francisco when everybody doesn't? Why aren't we concentrating resources? And then economically, I don't know how much more I can talk about this. I've been talking about it now for over a week. Why aren't we doing the same thing? Since when does everybody under $75,000 or under $99,000 get a $1,200 check and their kids get $500 if they're not unemployed? I'll give you an example. This will anger a lot of you in the audience. If you're a public school teacher and you're still getting paid, you still have a pension, you still have health care. If you're still getting paid and you earn under 75 or whatever the limit becomes, under $99,000, why are we giving you a check? What's the point of that? Here, I'll anger more people. If you're a federal employee, and there are many of them, and you're still getting a paycheck, and you're still getting a pension, and you're still getting health care, why are we paying you an additional sum of money? I don't get it. If there are other people in the private sector, let's say they're working at Amazon, which is hiring 150,000 more people at $15 a day. But let's say they're earning under 75 or 99, whatever the threshold becomes. Why are we paying them? Mark, to get money into this, it's not going to matter. They're not going to say, more money, let me spend more. Whatever they typically do with their money, they're going to do with their money. We're going to give money to airlines, right? But nobody's getting on airplanes. So we'll get liquidity into the system. You're not really getting liquidity into the system. You're saving the airlines. By the way, if we're going to shut down industries, then the government we do have a responsibility to help them. But we got to help them in a smart way. The airlines aren't going to get back in the air under the conditions we're setting. The restaurants aren't going to open under the conditions we're setting. And what they need is to be able to pay their bills. That's what they need, the ability to pay their bills. And if they're going to be shut down by order of the government, and by the way, if they're going to be shut down by order of the state government, don't the state governments have any responsibility here? I can understand the feds helping, don't get me wrong. And the smart way is these long-term, no-interest loans. And not to everybody. If somebody had a business that wasn't likely to survive anyway, that's a whole other story. But this is what happens when they rush this legislation through, and they're talking about now $2 trillion tonight. $2 trillion. Now, we've done this before, not on this scale. $850 billion, which was the most massive spending. It was under Obama, his so-called stimulus, where 15% actually got to where it was supposed to go. The president had the right idea. Freeze payroll deductions for those who are working. That also freezes it for employers. So at least those people who are working aren't going to lose their jobs. Hold on to them as long as you can, so you're not creating a bigger problem than you have. You can push more money through unemployment compensation. That system already exists. The infrastructure is already in place to facilitate the payments. You can do that. And then you're hitting people who are truly unemployed, not everybody. Truly unemployed. And then industry or business specific. Industry and business specific. Not all businesses and not all industries. I'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, they say every dark cloud in life has a silver lining, and today I'm going to prove it. The U.S. Constitution calls for two forms of legitimate money, gold and silver. Half a century ago, we abandoned both. Meanwhile, gold and silver prices have rocketed. This year, growing political and economic uncertainty could push prices even higher. So to help protect my listeners, Swiss America has a very special offer. Silver Walking Liberty half dollars at the amazing low price of $8.95 each. You heard me right, $8.95. Call now to reserve your silver coins at 800-289-2646, which spells 800-BUY coin. That's 800 buy coin. Silver Walking Liberty $half for just $8.95 each, delivered while supplies last. That's 800-289-2646, which spells 800 buy coin. 800 BUY coin. That's 800 buy coin while supply. Excellent site. Another thing he said is it's mostly people who have jobs who are saying, don't pick the economy over health. Now, Cuomo says the same thing. Don't pick the economy over health. Ladies and gentlemen, who's picking the economy over health? If we don't have a vibrant economy, people lose their jobs, 20, 25, 30% unemployment, businesses shutter, we're going to have a lot more to deal with than a virus. The health consequences will be unimaginable. And how do you think the people with a virus or cancer or a heart disease or whatever the ailment is, how do you think they're going to be treated with 20, 30% unemployment when the bottom falls out? What, they're going to meet in Congress again and spend, $17 trillion and make sure that abortion is right there at the top of the list? That'll fix everything. This is what destroys countries, destroys societies, turns a civil society into the rule of the jungle. This is what many of you have feared for years. And a country can go in that direction. Now, I'm sorry. I may be in the minority, but there's no way in hell I would vote for any bill that's $2 trillion on top of a $4.5 trillion budget. I don't give a damn what's in the bill. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? People demanding national action, right? But we can't have national radio hosts. Isn't that interesting? Very bizarre, if you ask me. Media Research Center is one of the finest organizations I've ever worked with. Media Research Center has been leading the war against dishonest news for over 30 years because the American people deserve the truth. The media in this country haven't provided the truth for a very long time. They're very good at giving us opinions and propaganda, but the truth, no. That's why the work of the MRC, especially their Newsbusters blog, is so important. And they focus 100% of their attention on the anti-Trump media, and they do it like no one else. And you can learn more about the MRC at mrclevin.org, mrclevin.org. MRC's Newsbusters blog is one of the most important websites right now. They're exposing all the media attacks on the president in his response to the virus outbreak, which has been really, really quite excellent. He's shown enormous leadership. Now, they'll do anything to take down our president. They've demonstrated that, including blaming him for a global pandemic. And as usual, the media never want to let a crisis go to waste. Now, luckily, the team at Newsbusters and the rest of the MRC are there to expose the media's dishonesty and make sure the American people get the truth. That's why we call the MRC America's media watchdog. Many of you are hunkered down. You ought to check it out. Go to mrclevin.org to learn more. That's mrclevin.org, mrclevin.org. Now, since I've been leading on this issue, I want to jump back into the pool here. This effort to constantly paint the President of the United States as hateful and bigoted and racist towards Asian Americans by the media is a disgrace. The media are the propagandists for the Chinese government. It is the Chinese communist regime that has pushed the narrative that if you call this virus the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus, you're obviously a racist. You're stereotyping the Chinese people, when in fact it has nothing to do with the Chinese people and everything to do with the communist regime. That regime is responsible for what you are going through today. That regime is responsible for those of you who are unemployed as a result of this virus. That regime is responsible for those of you who run these businesses, restaurants and bars and so forth, that are shuttering. That regime is responsible for the people who get sick from this virus and who die from this virus. So let us be abundantly clear. Well, over at MSNBC and CNN, they went so far as to blame the President of the United States for the illnesses and deaths that result from this virus. This virus, which first broke out in the Wuhan province, they believe it a specific outdoor market, which sells to eat snakes, koala bears, dogs, cats, and the rest. At least the scientific theory is, because none of our scientists have been allowed there, or the rest of the free world scientists, is that this is a bat, that this virus starts with bats, that it worked its way into the animals, particularly in that live market, and that it was projected onto human beings, either by eating or touching or what have you. The Chinese communist regime, not the Chinese people are suffering too as a result of this regime. What is wrong with these idiots in our media? What is wrong with the scumbags in our media? The Chinese people are suffering too as a result of what their government did. It's not even their government, it's been imposed on them. And Xi Jinping, the great hero, Joe Biden, his old buddy, Tom Friedman, Mike Bloomberg, every Democrat you can think of going soft on China. He covered it up. The early doctors who recognized in November they had a problem. They're not with us anymore, ladies and gentlemen. They disappeared. One was an ophthalmologist, an eye doctor. He's gone. The true journalists, the independent citizen journalists who traveled to Wuhan from Beijing, 2 of them, separately, with nothing but an iPhone. You may have heard they're made in China. Nothing but an iPhone. Reporting on what was taking place, taking video of people being forcibly removed from their homes. They've disappeared. They don't exist anymore. The Chinese communist regime covered this up for at least a month. Covered it up. So other countries couldn't prepare earlier for what was taking place. That's why it's called the China or Chinese virus. That's why it's called the Wuhan virus. And not some clever scientific numbers and combination of numbers and letters that the World Health Organization has assigned to it, which in many ways is useless in and of itself. The SARS virus, another one, another Chinese regime virus. Can't call it that. No, of course not. You can call Trump Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin anything you want. Mentally ill, on and on and on. But how dare you call a diabolical, evil, genocidal regime that certainly contributed to the vast spread of this disease into our own country and the implications from that. Certainly you can call this virus after that regime and after the communities in that country from which this was projected into our country. The media in our country want to debate this, want to try and paint the president as anti-Asian American, as a racist and a bigot. Here we are in the middle of what they tell us is the worst crisis we've ever faced. It's not, by the way, as the worst crisis we've ever faced. Let me put this in some context, as bad as this is. And it's bad, and it's going to get worse. I got it. I understand. I don't know why I have to keep saying that. You have to be rational. You see it. In the American Civil War, there were over 700,000 killed. In a nation of 24 to 25 million people. We had battles where over 30,000 men died in a battle in 24 to 48 hours. In one battle. Again, to put it in perspective, 24 to 25 million people. You can combine the deaths in our war in Iraq and our war in Afghanistan. It doesn't come close to 30, 35,000. And again, as terrible as it is, it's terrible. Our ancestors. I know this is going to shock everybody, especially the left and especially the media. I'm going to say it anyway. Have faced a lot worse than this. This is bad. I am not downplaying it. I'm trying to provide some perspective. Our ancestors have faced a lot worse than this. That doesn't make it better, especially for those who fall ill and those who pass away in their families. Doesn't make it better for those who lose their jobs and the businesses that shutter. But let's never forget, when you hear the hype on radio and the hype on TV and the hype in the media, you don't need to hype a hyper situation. You don't need to hype a hyper situation. Just discuss it. Just provide the facts, provide some news so the American people can make their own decision, so each of you can make your own decision, come up with your own viewpoint, rather than beat you over the head. I want to get back to this that I started with. Chloroquine. Effective antiviral therapeutic treatment, not a vaccine, against the Wuhan virus. The use of chloroquine tablets is showing favorable outcomes in humans infected with the virus, including faster time to recovery, shorter hospital stays. Our own CDC research shows that chloroquine also has strong potential as a preventative measure against the virus in the lab while we wait for a vaccine to be developed. Chloroquine is an inexpensive, globally available drug. It has been in widespread human use since 1945 against malaria, autoimmune, and various other conditions. Now, many of you may have autoimmune diseases or weakened immune systems. You might have Crohn's disease, you might have other chronic diseases, you might have Addison's disease, you might have rheumatoid arthritis. You all know what I'm talking about. Lupus, you all know what I'm talking about. And there's many others. Our CDC and the World Health Organization have not published treatment measures against coronavirus. The media completely ignore this. Then I had a follow-up question. There's this statement put out, some in the press, some of the opposition party of the president, that the president doesn't follow the science. Is the president following the science? Fauci. Every single time, and by that I mean almost every day, it's not like once a month, we're in the task force meeting. There's several of us, myself included, I'm not the only one, that's a scientist or a public health person. There are other people who have other responsibilities, so we get a good sampling of expertise that you need. And it's led by the vice president. Secretary Azar is there, Secretary of HHS. And we talk about every aspect. We make all of our decisions and recommendations that are based on the science. I have never in that room had a situation where I said, scientifically, this is the right thing to do, and they don't do it. Or scientifically, this is the wrong thing to do, and they did it anyway. Then we get up and we present it to the president, and he asks a lot of questions. That's his nature. He's constantly asking you questions. And I never, in the multiple times that I've done that, where I said, for scientific reasons, we should really do this, that he hasn't said, let's do it, or when he's decided, not decided, when he suggests, why don't we do this? And I say, no, that really is not a good idea from a scientific standpoint. He has never overruled me. This has been put to bed now. Now, I have to say, unlike Dr. Fauci, who is really, I'm very impressed with the man. Some conservatives, I don't know, is he a liberal? I'm very impressed with the man. But he's not looking at the full horizon of events. He's looking at his expertise. The President of the United States has to look at everything. if we have a dissolution of the civil society, that's a problem. That's not Fauci's job. That's not any of the medical experts' job. If we have massive unemployment that affects our ability to even run a third-class healthcare system, that has to concern a president of the United States. If we have such massive unemployment and we have other consequences, violence, massive depression, suicide, other things that fill up our hospital rooms and so forth, that's something the president of the United States has to decide. He's not elected to be a robot who simply takes in what this doctor or that doctor says and then marches along. It's his job to make the tough decisions, which is exactly what he's doing. But the media constantly trying to have these men at each other's throats really is so disgraceful, so appalling. I really don't believe these people in the media understand how much they are hated, and hated for good reason. Not because the president calls them the enemy of the people, but because they act like the enemy of the people. I'll be right back. Where does this program go, Mr. Producer? I should be doing, like that, what was that guy's name? I shouldn't start a sentence if I can't remember somebody's name. Remember the hostages? Who was that guy that got famous doing that? I forget his name. The whole country's telling me his name. Day 412. Day 413. I should be doing a 5-hour radio show every day. Program directors, I'm not, but I should. That's how much this stuff needs to be discussed in an extensive way. Unraveling some stuff, taking on some stuff. I told Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way, Richie Valdez is terrific. And I told him something to remember that most hosts probably don't. You need to make it worth the while of that person out there listening to you to tune you in. You must make it worth his or her while. See, I don't see each of you as a whole bunch of people. In my mind's eye, I see you sitting across the table from me. And I'm explaining things from my perspective. That's how I see it. I see you as a member of my extended family. You're coming in here to listen to me every evening? Do you know how blessed I am to have you here and how blessed I am to have this format? So I don't blow it by filling time. If I play music, it's because I'm in the mood to listen to music. And I figure every now and then you want to listen to music too. If I want to hit sports now and then, although rarely, I figure, now and then you need this thing to be broken up. But I also figure when I come across something about beds, which is an issue, ventilators, which is an issue, and all the rest of it, that you want to hear about it. That it's worth your time to be here. And we have great sponsors like the Media Research Center. The Media Research Center has been leading the war against dishonest news for over 30 years because the American people deserve the truth. And that's why the work of the MRC and their video team at MRC TV, and they are great, is so important. They expose the media's lies and make sure you see the videos the liberal media don't want you to see. You can learn a whole lot more. Go to mrclevin.org, mrclevin.org. MRC produces original commentary and video. MRC's at the top of the list. Go to mrclevin.org. That's mrclevin.org. We have a powerful third hour. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to TV and watch hysterical people and consultants and stick with me. Stick with me. I'll be right back. Crap. Hold on. The damn thing changed on me. Hold on, I'm reading the best I can. What happened here? I'm reading this off my iPhone. Stick with me. All right, I'll find it. Hold on. Okay. Let's see. I'm finding it. Everybody sing along. Damn it. The prominent doctor at the time, Benjamin Rush, quickly identified the illness as yellow fever. By August 25, universal terror, as described by Kerry, began spreading like wildfire through Philadelphia. Many fled the city. There's so great a terror that carts, wagons, chairs, and coaches could be constantly seen leaving the city over the next few weeks. Those left behind sought refuge indoors. Congress was adjourned and moved to the then remote village of Germantown. Streets became empty as business halted. 1900, Lillian Rhodes, author of The Story of Philadelphia, commented that the hearse and the doctor's carriage were the sole vehicles on the street. She also stated that hospitals were in a horrible condition. Nurses could not be had at any price. To go into a house in which nearly every bed contained a dead body and the floors reeked with filth was courting death in its most dreadful form, quote unquote. In the history of Philadelphia, no city has ever faced its own mortality to the extent that Philadelphia suffered under the yellow fever affliction. The spread of yellow fever to Philadelphia resulted in panic and fear of death. And the number of deaths changed from 10 victims a day in August to 100 a day in October, and sudden exit was of common occurrence, as depicted by Samuel Breck. He also noticed that people were in health one day, were buried the next. The city was almost completely unprepared for such a catastrophe. No hospitals or hospital stores were in readiness to alleviate the sufferings of the poor, as mentioned by Breck. Hope became dismal. Rhodes also commented on the atmosphere of Philadelphia as deserted and desolate. Yet during such a tragedy, there was also an intense struggle for a cure and containment. Dr. Benjamin Rush, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, became the leader of the fight against yellow fever. Though urged to flee the city like others, Rush said, "I have resolved to stick to my principles, my practice, and my patience to the last extremity." Dr. Rush gave the people of Philadelphia courage and hope. Fear engulfed the city of Philadelphia, while many resorted to prayer and appealed to the divine. Dr. Rush believed that yellow fever was caused by unsanitary conditions, especially those of the docks, sewage system, and rotting vegetables such as rotting coffee from the Arch Street Wharf. Boy, was he right. He concluded that the illness was not transmitted from human to human, but by putrid exhalations in the atmosphere. Exhalations in the atmosphere. He also recognized that weather played a part in the epidemic, and that the infection did not spread from human to human contact, though many people at the time wanted to point blame at the newly arrived St. Dominique Revolution refugees. Rush was adamant to not point the blame to outsiders, but instead accuse the sanitary conditions of the city and implore residents to clean up the city so as not to entrail the disease upon future generations. Rush believed the epidemic could be prevented by cleaning the docks, pumping out the bilge water of a ship, water that collects and stagnates in the bilge of a ship, cleaning sewers more often, washing the streets in warm water, removing filth from home better, employing toilets more often, stopping building so close in alleys, and eating less meat in the summer. In regards to disease, Rush had said, "To every natural evil, heaven has provided an antidote." African Americans played a vital role in the epidemic of 1793. Rush pleaded for the help of Philadelphia's free black community, believing that African Americans were immune to the disease. African Americans worked tirelessly with the sick and dying as nurses, cart drivers, coffin makers, and grave diggers. Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, religious leaders who would later go on to found the first black churches of Philadelphia, African Episcopal Church of St. Thomas, and African Methodist Episcopal Church, respectively, described their experience as volunteers in 1793. Quote, "At this time, the dread that prevailed over people's minds was so general that it was a rare instance to see one neighbor visit another, and even friends, when they met in the streets, were afraid of each other. Much less would they admit into their houses. This was not the only horror that Absalom Jones and Richard Allen observed. They observed horrendous behavior from the fearful citizens of Philadelphia. Many white people have acted in a manner that would make humanity shudder, they said. Despite Dr. Rush's theory, 240 African Americans died of yellow fever. Now, the unwilling victims of yellow fever were not just the infected. Children often suffered from a mild case of yellow fever, while adults severely suffered. The number of orphans increased as parents became casualties of the fever. Jones and Allen observed, quote, "A woman died. We were sent to bury her. On our going into the house and taking the coffin in, a dear little innocent accosted us with, 'Mama is asleep. Don't wake her.' But when she saw us put her in the coffin, the distress of the child was so great that it almost overcame us. When she demanded why put her mama in the box, we didn't know how to answer her, but committed her to the care of a neighbor and left her with heavy hearts." However, as a result, many orphanages were created to meet the growing needs. Benjamin Rush did find his own treatment for yellow fever by October. By blood leaching and purging patients, Dr. Rush decreased mortality. In some cases, he would remove a very high proportion of blood from the body. He often gave calomel, a mercury compound, as a method to purge the bowels. There were several doctors and public figures, such as journalist William Cobbett, who attacked that is, Rush's medical practice. Cobbett was the primary political enemy of Rush, going so far as to calling him a quack, a murderer, a mentally unstable, according to Jim Murphy, author of The American Plague. Later in 1800, Rush would sue Cobbett for libel for the amount of $5,000, after which Cobbett fled the country in disgrace. Though there is no true cure and a vaccine was not developed until 1937, Dr. Rush's avid conviction to his personal cure gave his patients strength and hope. Estimated that his medical treatment saved over 6,000 people with his dedication and perseverance to find a treatment. At one point, Dr. Rush himself fell ill of yellow fever, and with his own treatment administered by one of his assistants, he became healthy despite a persistent cough. Lillian Rhodes comments on opinion of Rush after the outbreak. She writes, "Dr. Benjamin Rush, whose heroism during the yellow fever epidemic in Philadelphia during 1793 endeared him even to his political enemy." Now, frosts mid to late October, which froze over the stagnant pools of water where mosquitoes breed greatly, decreased the incidence of yellow fever infections. By November, the horrific epidemic was over, and residents finally returned to their homes and lives. Those who stayed, such as Dr. Rush or Absalom Jones, to fight the yellow fever, were glorified heroes. Circuit Judge William Bradford, after hearing of Rush's deeds, wrote, "He has become the darling of the common people, and his humane fortitude and exertions will render him deservedly dear." The only conflict that remained was the cause of the yellow fever plague, and whether it was from the filth of the city, as Rush believed, or the opinions of others who argued that the seeds of the disease came from the West Indies, as stated by modern author Bob Arnebeck. Soon after, the governor of Pennsylvania, Thomas Mifflin, embraced both ideas, called for greater civic cleanliness and stricter quarantines and inspection of incoming vessels. The yellow fever epidemic of 1793 forever changed Philadelphia. Though the initial impact was gloom and dread, great adaptations were made by the people of Philadelphia. Hospitals, isolation hospitals, and orphanages were built. Political leaders learned the importance of nursing care from the epidemics and attempted to provide it more carefully. Aggressive attempts were made to improve the city's sanitary conditions. Laws came into existence for homeowners to hold responsibility for cleaning up their property. And Murphy stated, the governor, these cleanliness laws were rather weak and generally ignored by all. However, during the 19th century, these laws would eventually be enforced. A great improvement was made in Philadelphia's water supply following the outbreak. Waste from privy pits, byproducts of manufacturing, and trash of markets seeped into private and public wells used for drinking and cooking, which resulted in what Jim Murphy describes as evil-smelling and evil-tasting water. The citizens of Philadelphia believed that foul-smelling water could be the cause of health problems. In 1799, Benjamin Latrobe, father of American architecture, was hired to design and construct Philadelphia's first waterworks and the first water system in the United States. His waterworks design removed water from the Schuylkill River by a steam engine pump, which pumped the water to a central pump house. The central pump house, located at the large central square at Broad and High Streets, used another steam engine pump to lift the water into the huge wood reservoirs, which used gravity to carry the water to houses and businesses around the city. Latrobe later went on to design current capital of the United States, Washington, D.C.'s water system. Ironically, he died of yellow fever while constructing the waterworks of New Orleans in 1820. One of the immediate changes to Philadelphia was the dispersal of residents who lived on the water side of Philadelphia. Merchants then living on Water or Front Street moved to reside in western outskirts of Philadelphia. The population movement changed the growth of Philadelphia away from the waterfront. Rush had an enormous impact on the growth of medicine and medical care, but at the time, many other physicians, the College of Physicians, disagreed with Rush's belief of the cause. So he resigned from the College of Physicians as he viewed flawed medical logic and professional jealousy from his peers, as stated by Jim Murphy, the American award-winning author. Though the cause of yellow fever would not be known for another century, Rush was criticized for his belief that illness was not imported. Turns out he was right. Yellow fever tore through the city like wildfire, causing death of 1/6 of the population remaining. Though many tried to flee the city, the effects of such a devastating epidemic could not be avoided. Out of the death and decay, several of history's greatest doctors, such as Benjamin Rush, became combatants against the plague and consequently advanced medicine. And the growth of Philadelphia and the history of Pennsylvania were forever altered by this tragedy, which was endured by the residents of Philadelphia. Little bit of history, little bit of context. I'll be right back.
Mark!
We're going to take some calls. We haven't taken calls really in 2 days. Some of you have been waiting. Oh, my Lord. I apologize. Some of you have been waiting over an hour and a half. We're going to get to your calls right after the sponsor. Online shopping is supposed to be easy. So why is finding coupon codes that actually work so hard? This is very important because a lot of you are doing stuff online right now. With Honey, it doesn't have to be. Honey is the free online shopping tool that automatically finds the best promo codes and applies them to your cart. Just download Honey to your computer and shop on all your favorite websites like normal. And when you check out, just click the little Apply Coupons button that pops up. That's it. You wait a few seconds for Honey to scan its massive database of all the working coupons on the web. Then watch your price drop. Now, Honey works on nearly every online store, including Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Macy's, Etsy, more. Honey's found over $2 billion in savings. That's just for me, Mr. Producer. But really, that's why it has over 100,000 five-star reviews on the Google Chrome store. Not using Honey is literally passing up free money. And here's the deal. It's free for you to use. Hello? It's free for you to use and installs in just a few seconds. Get Honey for free. You can get it for free at joinhoney.com/Levin. Joinhoney.com/Levin. That's joinhoney.com/Levin. One more time, because I really want you to take advantage of this. Joinhoney.com/Levin. All right. Let's start with the people who've been waiting the longest. Dean, Great Lakes, Illinois, XM Satellite, go. You're on, sir. Go right ahead, Dean.
This is Dan.
Well, Dan,
anyway,
Dean. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. I have a simple, flexible, targeted, and inexpensive financial relief plan for anybody or any business affected by coronavirus. What Congress is doing here is insane, Mark. We don't have $2 trillion. We're broke.
No. You don't even understand. It's not just $2 trillion. Larry Kudlow's out there bragging that it's really $6 trillion. I'm going, what? What?
I hope
Unbelievable.
I hope somebody's listening. If I hope somebody from the president's office is listening.
They are.
If you agree with me here, I hope you'll get me in touch with somebody. I'm going to explain this real quick.
No, I'm not going to get you in touch with anybody. It would be nice if you got to your point, though.
I will. Basically, all we need to do is suspend regular payments that people and businesses need to make. Rent, loan, mortgages, student loans, credit cards.
And what happens to all those creditors?
They can borrow the money from the Fed.
All right, this is insane. No, that's not how it works, because sometimes little people are landlords. So that's insane. Thank you for your call. Suspend all payments. And where does the president have that power? Can anybody show me even any statute where the president has that power? Can you imagine the economic dislocation that would create? Whew. Let's keep going. Poor fellow waited an hour. It waited 110 minutes on that. I'm sorry. Landon, Marshall, Texas, the great KTBB. Go. Go right ahead, sir. You're on the air. Landon.
Hey, Mark. Good to talk to you. I've been listening to you for years. I'm 35 years old.
Yes,
2
sir.
weeks ago, I put a Facebook post out, and my post was, should we destroy 100% of our economy for 1% of the population, or should that 1% of the population take personal responsibility and isolate themselves until a vaccine can come out? And if they are willing to go out and expose themselves, that's what freedom's about. And I had a lot of pushback from friends of mine saying, well, no, it's our responsibility to keep them from getting it. And I was like, wait a minute. People in the United States have peanut allergies. Do we shut the economy down for peanut allergies? I know it's a smaller percent of the population.
Well, this is a little different. This is, you're not consuming anything. You can touch something because this stuff lasts for 3 days. Just function as you normally would, not even knowing what's taking place and get it. So the analogy isn't correct. And the reason you probably got pushback is because the argument's a little harsh. I would put it a little differently. We can protect these people by enforcing quarantines, by enforcing protection of the people who are at risk. That we can do. We can also ensure that much of the medical resources that are available are focused on these people, on these communities where the outbreak is taking place. And the president, I think, has handled this almost flawlessly up till now. And what he needs to do now is, as they say, pivot and start. And he's talking about it, opening up parts of the economy that are not affected. And I think, for instance, many of these universities and colleges made a huge mistake. Now they have the data. They should call their students back. Now they have the data. They should call their students back, get them out of the general community, get them out of their homes where their parents and grandparents are and are more vulnerable. There's a lot of things we can do that we're not hearing from the professional healthcare and medical experts that a president has to do now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with the president said it today, and I just heard you say it.
And he's under attack for it. Actually, I've been saying it, to be honest, since the beginning of last week. As the data's coming in, okay, now we know who's vulnerable. Pretty much. Not with perfection. You're never going to get that. And the more tests we get, the more it seems to underscore these points. That the vast majority of the American people are not vulnerable. That the overwhelming majority of young people are not vulnerable. And that people who are elderly are vulnerable. Not all of them, but a big enough percentage. And people with weak immune systems are vulnerable. And now we have this drug. And I don't understand why the media fights this. When the governor of New York says he's going to use it, they have a ticker tape parade for the guy, essentially. When Trump talks about it, this particular malaria drug, it's like, well, you don't know the science, and you don't know this, and you don't know that. The president is not a bureaucrat. And the downside is minimal compared to the upside. And so he's making very rational points, I think. All right, Landon, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you very much, your call. Joel, Green Bay, Wisconsin, on the Mark Levin app. Go. You're on, Joel. Go right ahead.
Hey, Mark. Great one. Great to talk to you. You're our substitute teacher here in the household when the kids
No. That's Brother Rush. But anyway, go right ahead.
Well, we love listening to your law and constitution, economics, most of all common sense. Mark, what the heck? 1 million, 2 trillion, 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 6 trillion. Where's that? I mean, where is one Republican saying what you're saying? I know they can't say it as well as you're saying it, but we have programs for all this stuff, all these, the nets to help people.
What's happening is they're bidding each other up. They want to deal as desperately as possible. They want to push money into the economy. They're going to push a lot of money into the wrong places. This debt is going to really overload your children and grandchildren one day. I've never seen anything like this, ever. I'm surprised at Kudlow. I'm not surprised at Mnuchin. But there ought to be some kind of cap on this. You go from $1 trillion to 1.2 to 1.8 to 2 trillion in 72 hours. And then they're bragging that it's really $6 trillion because a $500 billion fund that the Treasury has can be used, therefore, or thereby the Fed to take additional money and push additional money into the system. I don't think most people listening to me right now are going to benefit from most of this. I really don't. And then on top of that, you have the Democrats saying it's not enough money. And then they have all their wackadoodle, fascistic, socialist agenda items to impose on all the rest of us in the private sector to ensure we never recover from this. They want this to be the new FDR New Deal period where they fundamentally alter our nation and our private sector, even beyond what you see today.
Exactly. So when Pelosi wants all this garbage, Republicans say, well, we won. Pelosi wants 100 times garbage, and we give her 50 times garbage. We're still getting garbage. Like, where does it end? No. I hope the president slaps her down on it and says, this is crazy. Well,
right now it's the Republicans of the Senate. They keep talking about we're on the 2-yard line. We're almost there. We'll be voting on this soon. But, excuse me, a Bloomberg reporter says one of the holdups is that the Democrats want the small business loans to be able to go to Planned Parenthood. So the irony is, we're pushing and fighting this virus, looking for beds and ventilators to save people. Well, the Democrats want to kill people. It's really an amazing thing.
We're fighting two viruses, the coronavirus and the Democratic Party virus.
Well, the abortion virus, for sure. We're not even talking about medical abortion. Just call it a choice and you're fine. It's over. You don't have to think about the morality of it. All right, my friend. I appreciate it very, very much. Kara, Dallas, Texas, the great WBAP. Go.
Hi, Mr. Levin. Thank you for your show. The amount of work you put into it, I can't even imagine. But
my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make mention to what you were discussing the first hour about Cuomo and New York's preparation in their resources. I am a physician, and I was in training in the tri-state area when Obamacare passed. And after that, all the hospitals just kind of enlarged and conglomerated. And what they wound up doing was really eliminating a lot of these smaller hospitals that had ICU beds, that had resources. And there was an elimination of a lot of these smaller hospitals. One we can mention is just St. Vincent's, which everybody knew and loved. So you start looking at some of the changes that the law, the unexpected consequences that this law had. It actually eliminated resources for people and patients in New York City, Manhattan, especially,
and especially in the outer suburbs and the rural areas.
Oh, definitely. And there's a lot of residents that lost places to train, but mostly it was a lot of resources. A lot of people went to these hospitals because they didn't need big academic centers, but those little hospitals don't exist anymore.
No, and I live in an area where there's a big hospital in Fairfax County. I live in the neighboring county, which has gobbled up all the area hospitals, and they say they need to do this in order to survive. I don't know whether that's true or not, but you're quite right. And then, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just because of a lot of the legislation that came through Obamacare made it so that these larger hospital systems were able to eat up these smaller hospitals. They couldn't sustain. A lot of these smaller hospitals are also owned by physicians, which are now
They're now prohibited in many instances from owning hospitals.
Yes, we can't do that. So we can't make money.
And why? Why do we care? Why do we give a damn who owns the hospitals?
Well, because physicians tend to make a little bit better.
No. I mean, why is it the government? If physicians want to open a hospital, who the hell cares?
We've been told we can't.
I know. I understand this, but that's why you have limited beds, and that's why you have these certification of need laws, these con laws, where the states want all this power, and then when they have it, then there's a pandemic, then they keep pointing to the federal government.
Well, there were a lot of hospitals in New York that closed down, and they had ICU beds.
All right, you take care. Thank you for your call. Let's continue. Eric, Bend, Oregon, the great KBND. Go.
Hey, Mark, you're doing a great job, and kudos to the doctor you just had there from Texas. I'm a physician here in Oregon, and I will leapfrog right off of what she said, that hospital consolidation. The big hospitals, if they kept the small ones open, turned them all into basically first aid stations. And in addition, almost all the hospitals basically kicked out and forced out their usual medical staff, their community physicians, and hired hospitalists, because the hospitalists theoretically were more efficient, could see more patients, maybe were a little bit quicker, and all of a sudden we have all those same hospital systems sending out emails to us now, please sign up, we need extra physicians, we'll let you in on an emergency basis, we'll give you all those privileges back that we wrestled away from you a decade ago. Please, we're short-staffed. Well, what the heck did they think was going to happen?
All right, sir. I appreciate your call. You're learning a lot, aren't you? I am. Mike, Independence, Missouri, the great KCMO. Go. You're on, brother. Yes, sir.
Mark.
Yes, sir, Mike.
Yeah, I was, my wife works at a hospital that she had the first death in this area about 12 days ago today. Within a day or so, across the state line here in Independence, Missouri, this mayor shut everything down. They closed all the schools, sent the kids to their grandparents, the grade schoolers. The other kids, junior high and high school, I don't know, out running the streets. Anything could happen to them. And to me, that's total insanity.
It is.
All that you said about it, I felt the same way. I was all about that, and let's protect those. I would argue about that. I got on local radio and argued about that, and I was ignorant, even though I've followed this since December. I've looked at studies. I know what's going on. And these people, my whole point was, this is a media pandemic.
I don't know. The media is not helping. There's a lot of weird forces at play here. The media has been disgraceful in these press conferences with the President of the United States, and there's certain individuals in the media, clearly, who are not really focused on the evidence, who are not really productive, not really passing the news on, and they're pushing these hyperbolic agendas. But I look, my argument now is we've got to get the economy going. I'm agreeing 100% with the president. As a matter of fact, no brag, just fact. I've been talking about this for over a week. We got to get the economy going. You don't abandon the science. You use the science. What's the science telling you? It's telling you not everybody is going to be severely affected by this. Okay, well, who is? Well, this group and this group and this area and that area. Well, hit that group and hit that group and hit that area and hit that area. Does that mean the virus might squeeze out in the other areas? Of course it does. But you don't kill the patient, that is the economy, in order to deal with this in a rational way. I'll be right back. Well, you're putting the scores up there for this virus. Why don't you put the scores up there for cancer, diabetes, heart attacks, strokes, murder, car accidents? I know they're not exactly the same thing. But you're providing no context whatsoever when you do that. Well, it's from the CDC. I don't care who it's from. I'm looking at numbers, 600 people dead from this virus. That's a lot. It's awful. That comes to a little over 13 per state. Now, I know that's going to grow. Don't get me wrong. But there's no context provided whatsoever. Mark, are you saying it's not a pandemic? I never said any such thing. I'm saying, and why is that the resort when somebody brings up this stuff, a rational point? Stop playing games with ratings and hits. I'm sick of it. This thing is bad enough. Computer systems in cars, well, they're the new normal, aren't they? And they ain't cheap. From electronically controlled transmissions to touchscreen displays to dozens of sensors. But all this advanced tech is expensive to fix if and when it breaks. That's why we have CarShield in our 2010 Camaro. CarShield has affordable protection plans that can save you thousands for a covered repair, including computers, GPS, electronics, and more. I have sponsors, ladies and gentlemen, that I have for a reason. We have many services and companies that come to us. I pick the ones that I think are the most important and that can actually save you money and protect you. This is one of them. With CarShield, you're behind the wheel of your own plan. CarShield is customizable monthly plans with rates as low as $99 a month. Well, you're not hit with some massive $4,000 or $5,000 bill. You get to choose your favorite mechanic or dealership to do the work, and CarShield takes care of the rest. CarShield has helped over 1 million customers. So drive with confidence knowing you got coverage from America's #1 auto protection provider. With rates as low as $99 a month, you have nothing to lose. Get covered by CarShield today. Here's what you do. Call 800-CAR-6000, mention code Levin. 800-CAR-6000. Mention code Levin, you save 10%. Or use the internet. Visit carshield.com. Write in code Levin, Levin. That's carshield.com. Write in code Levin. You'll also save 10%. Either way, you save 10%. That's carshield.com, code Levin. A deductible may apply. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, emergency personnel, all the people at our hospitals, doctors, nurses, support staff. Thank you very much.